Hello and welcome to today's podcast episode with your host Debs Thorpe. And today we are diving into the secret to really embodying and practicing true self-love. So let's dive in. Okay, so self-love is something that we will all have heard so much about throughout our life, and we will understand the importance of being able to practice self-love in our lives. But there's a difference between what I would call the more superficial practices of self-love and what it is to then truly practice self-love in a way that creates change and transformation within. So that's the bit that we're going to dive into in today's episode. So to begin with, I just want to differentiate between the kind of two layers of self-love, if you like. There is nothing wrong with the more superficial layer of self-love practices. So these are things like having a nice long hot bath, if that's what you like, or taking some time to read your favorite book, or write some positive affirmations, or write in your gratitude journal. Like, all of these are amazing practices in and of themselves. They will just only go so far if there's still this underlying belief of not feeling good enough or worthy of love, and not being able to access that compassionate, loving, nurturing voice within. And that's the part that will really create huge amounts of change and transformation within. So there's I wrote an article on this, and I'm actually going to be teaching a workshop on this later in the year. So I'll pop all of the details into the description of this podcast episode for you. And if you're listening to this way beyond the date of the workshop, you'll still be able to access the recording. So do check it out, because I'm going to really dive more in depth into this. But for today's episode, I want to give you a really practical explanation and a way to work with self-love that is really going to make a difference for you today. So when I talk about the secret of self-love, I refer to acceptance. Now, there's almost always a bit of an inner groan when we hear the word acceptance, because it's like one of those things that we know, but we don't necessarily really know what it means to actually work with it. Like, we know it as this kind of abstract concept, but we don't know what that means in reality. So I'm going to guide you through a really simple practice that you can do now, whereby you are implementing acceptance right here and now in your life, and that becomes the path and the vehicle for self-love. Okay, so I want you to imagine that you are at a gathering of people, and as you enter the room or the area where everyone is gathered, you become aware that you are all like instantly attracted to some people. Maybe you know them, you're familiar with them, you're on the same vibe, you find it really easy to connect with them, you find it really easy to be in their presence and their company, and you're naturally drawn and attracted to them, right? So you spot those people there, and you can instantly feel more at peace, relaxed, at ease. Maybe there's a bit of excitement there that you get to see these people. Then there might be some other people there at the gathering that you kind of know, but they're not really like people that you would actively spend lots of time with. So you'll be polite and you might say hello and you might engage in a brief conversation, but you wouldn't want to spend your whole time with those people. And then there might be the odd person, like odd one or two people, whereby you actively don't like and don't want to engage with them. And, maybe it's, you don't know why, but you're just like, your energy doesn't mix. You just don't want to be around that person or those people. And, when we talk about this gathering and this setting, it's quite easy for you to be fluid and flexible. So you can choose where you're going to go, who you're going to spend the time with. You get to spend all of your time with the people that you really want to be with. Okay, so you get to have this really enjoyable, amazing experience. So I now want you to translate this and imagine that this gathering is your internal world. And all those people are all the different parts of yourself. Now it becomes a lot harder to choose where you're going to spend your time and energy, because like all of these parts are within yourself 24/7. Now, we as human beings tend to get pretty good at suppressing and denying and pushing away the parts of ourselves that we don't like. That goes into shadow work, and that's a whole other episode that we'll go into. But for the most part, we don't necessarily know how to interact and engage with all of these different parts of ourselves. And that's what can lead to our internal world feeling quite chaotic or not peaceful. And so I now want to bring in this practice of acceptance that is going to really bring that self-love into your inner world right now. So let's go back to that gathering analogy. So I now want you to imagine that you are the person that is like the odd one out, that's in the corner of the gathering, that no one really wants to speak to or engage with. And I want you to imagine how that feels to be that person. You don't know what it is about you that makes people not want to engage with you or be around you. You're trying your best to connect, but it just doesn't land well with people. And I'm sure we have all had that experience of feeling like the odd one out or the one that's ostracized. We understand the shame, the discomfort, the pain, the anguish that we experience in that place. So I just want you to allow yourself to imagine that you are that person for a moment. And now I want you to imagine that a little child, maybe 5 or 6, comes up to you. You don't know them, they don't know you, and they're really curious and they want to know more about you. And so they come up to you and they will start asking you who you are and why are you here, and maybe they have a little toy or something that they've got, and they're showing you this toy and they're really excited about it. And you start to feel part of something. You start to feel a connection. And as this interaction is going on, you can feel your heart begin to soften and open a little bit. And maybe you even start to feel like an inner smile. And you can almost feel your whole body and your whole system start to relax and open up a little bit. And this is feeling good. It's feeling nice, right? So let's bring this back to your inner world, and let's imagine that the parts of you that you don't like, that you don't feel are acceptable, that maybe bring with them some level of pain or discomfort. Imagine how that part of you feels to be actively rejected or pushed away. Okay. And now I want you to imagine the power of bringing that curious child to that part of you. So whatever part of you feels rejected or pushed away or suppressed right now, we get to invite them and to step forward. And then we get to bring this energy of the curious child to it and not sit in judgment, not try and make it into something it isn't, not try and change it or suppress it or make it go away. We just get to allow it to be. We allow it to exist, and we bring this curiosity of that childlike state to it. And we get to ask it, like, what's it about? Why is it here? What's going on? What does it need? Like, and we get to engage with it from that place. And that is acceptance in action. That is the practice of self-acceptance, where we can begin to allow all these different parts of ourselves to come forward and have a voice and have space without moving to change, judge, criticize, suppress. We allow them to be. And this practice of self-acceptance then becomes the vehicle of allowing them to access unconditional love. And that love will be the thing that, if they need some healing, if they're carrying any wounds, it will allow them to transform and heal if they need to. Okay, we don't have to actively like all the different parts of ourselves. There's still some parts of me that, I'll sit there on some days and wish that they weren't there, or they were different, or, because they can make life harder or more complicated at times, right? But they're also the things that will help me to create this amazing life. So if let's ground this in an example. One powerful way that I actively used this, probably a couple of years ago now, was the fact that there is a part of me, or it's a part of who I am, that really, really deeply feels. Okay, I'm very empathic, very intuitive. My personality type is INFJ. I am the introverted, deeply feeling, intuitive person. And I've spent many years trying to change that part of me, to try and not feel so much. Okay. And I mean, I've been in this industry for 20 years. I know many mindset practices and many ways to create change and see things differently. And so I was trying for so long to be able to go through the world and not feel so much, because there's times when that's really painful and it creates a lot of suffering. And I feel it not just emotionally, but very physically. So I can hear stories sometimes, people's experiences, see things in the world, and it literally feels like my heart is breaking open, like it's like being tore open, and that's painful. And so I was trying to find ways of not having to go through this experience. Right? It's not nice, it's not pleasant. As human beings, we don't want to be in pain. We want to try and find a way out of it. And I was walking my dog one evening, and I just had this moment of going, like, I am done fighting this. I'm done trying to make this something else, because for as much as there's times when this is a painful experience for me, it also means that I experience joy and love and excitement and euphoria in a really big way as well. Okay, so I might experience the extremes of it, but wow, that's amazing. Like I actually, when I think about that whole spectrum, I love that I have the ability to be able to do that. And once I started to do this practice of accepting and embracing that part of me, that's who I am, it gave me permission to discover the way that I then wanted to be in relationship with this. Okay, so rather than, I don't know, what it wasn't quite the person who was in the corner of the gathering and wasn't allowed to be there. The way that I think I was trying to work with this part of me was almost like the sculptor, and there was already this really amazing masterpiece, and I was picking at it going, oh, but what about if we just chipped away at that bit and molded that bit? And when I actually gave myself permission to stand back and go, wow, like it's already amazing, like it doesn't need me just faffing around with it. What that then did for me was give me permission to be in a different relationship. So I then fully stepped into this deeply feeling part of me. And yes, there's still many times when I will feel my heart break, very literally. But then I will then allow myself to go to the places, meet the people that will stitch my heart back together again. And for me, that's typically going out in nature. So the beauty of an amazing sunset, or sitting and watching the ocean, going for a beautiful hike in the forest. That allows my heart to stitch itself back together again, and for me to feel recentered again, and to allow the sheer beauty and magnificence of life in. And so I've learned to integrate those experiences now in a way that is amazing. And I've actually grown to really love this part of me. And so this is what I mean about this journey, that, you know, there are going to be some wounded, unhealed parts of us that absolutely get to transform and heal. And by that nature, they'll change. But there's also parts of us that they're inherently part of us. They're part of our identity. And we can waste so much time and energy fighting against them, or trying to keep them locked away, or trying to change them, when actually we get to bring this practice of acceptance, which then allows us to choose the relationship we want with them. And so I really invite you to do that today. I invite you to imagine yourself at a gathering. Imagine all these different parts of you, and imagine having a curious, non-judgmental conversation with them, and then choose how you want your relationship to be with them. There's other parts of you. Say I also have a very driven part of me, a very driven, stubborn part of me, which that's amazing at times when I've got a really amazing idea, and I need to have some focus, and I need to push through to get it done, right? Or I'm 26 miles into a 34-mile ultra marathon, and I need that driven, stubborn part of me to kick in. Like, that's the thing that's going to get me over the finish line. Right? I did this a couple of times last year. I know what that takes, and I love that part of me for that. That part of me is the very thing that also drove me to burnout, because it was continually driving me in a direction that was not fundamentally aligned for me. So we get to choose when we activate these parts. And now, when that driven part of me wants to kick in and wants to be like, me, pick me, like, I've got this, I'm gonna like push you forward, I'll now catch it and stop it and go, okay, before we run away with this, I'm just going to check in and check that this is an aligned action right now. Because if it's an aligned action, right, we're going to do it. We're going to go full steam. Okay. If it's not an aligned action, this is going to take us full steam down the wrong path, and we know where that goes. So that then becomes a check. So I hope throughout this episode you can begin to see how we can weave in this experience of our inner world, the different parts of ourselves, and how this practice of acceptance of those parts allows love to come in and allows us to operate with so much more peace, and this feeling like we're in control of our inner world and we get to direct it, and that feels amazing when we can go through life and do that. So that's my invitation for you today, is do this in whatever way feels good for you. You might be able to imagine it. You might want to get some paper out and give all these different parts of you characters or names and be able to work with it in that way. There's another image that I often use with this, where we imagine that all the different parts of ourselves are sat around a campfire, and they might just sit there and be quiet, or they might tell a story to everybody else. So we can work with it in that way as well. So I'd really, really love to hear from you how this resonates for you. What has been some of your key takeaways from this episode, and whether thinking about it in this way is really helpful for you, and whether this way of working with acceptance and self-love is something that you feel like you can really actively grasp and work with today. So until next time, I wish you well and look forward to the next episode. Bye for now.